Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, where Proudmore038 here is taking the brand new, all-singing, all-dancing star of stage, screen and dockyard canteen, the Tier 10 Royal Navy battlecruiser HMS St. Vincent, out for a spin. Quick word about the naming conventions of these new battlecruisers. So we've got HMS Rook, HMS Hawk, HMS Duncan, HMS St. Vincent here at Tier 10, and then the premium HMS Collingwood. All, with the exception of the St. Vincent, named after admirals, which is kind of weird. I mean, there's almost consistency in the naming conventions, and then they kind of fell over at Tier 10. With St. Vincent obviously being named after the Crown Colony of the island of St. Vincent. But the thing that bothers me about the names that they've given to these new ships, I mean, they're good names. They've been in use in the Royal Navy for centuries, and that's kind of the problem, because they still are in use in the Royal Navy, which means none of these ships would have ever had these names, because you don't have two units in the Navy with the same name at the same time. At the time that this ship is supposed to have been built, it's a fantasy design by the way, it never existed obviously, but at the time that this ship, the HMS St. Vincent, was supposed to have been built in World of Warships, HMS St. Vincent existed in the Royal Navy as a boy seaman training establishment in Gosport in Hampshire between 1927 and 1969. It's the same with HMS Rook, one of the other battle cruisers. HMS Rook, until relatively recently, was the name of the Royal Navy shore establishment at the dockyard in Gibraltar. HMS Collingwood, the premium battlecruiser, would never have been called HMS Collingwood because right at the end of the Second World War, the shore establishment HMS Collingwood was constructed in Fearsome in Hampshire and is still in service today as the Maritime Warfare, Communications and Weapon Engineering Training School. It's possible that the World of Warships battlecruiser HMS Duncan could have existed if they'd managed to slip it in quickly between the D-class destroyer that was scrapped in 1945 of the same name and the Blackwood-class frigate that was built in 1957 of the same name. And as for HMS Hawk, I suppose it's possible if it was constructed after 1955 when the shore establishment HMS Hawk at Exbury in Hampshire was decommissioned, then yeah, they could have probably gotten away with an HMS Hawk. But by and large, they've managed to pick a bunch of names for all of these new battlecruisers that mostly would never have been available for use because they were already in use in the Royal Navy. So I just wanted to get that off my chest because, ooh, wow. That Conda's getting absolutely hammered. Yeah, 18-inch armour-piercing shells, kids. Don't sail broadside in a cruiser to something that's lobbing 18-inch armour-piercing shells at you. Oh, he's dead already. Good start. But yes, I just needed to get that whole name thing off my chest because it's been winding me up ever since the names of these ships were announced. So anyway, HMS St. Vincent. They've really taken that battlecruiser concept and they're running with it in this thing. Because this thing has some serious firepower. 9 18-inch guns with a 30-second reload. And you saw what they did to that Conda when it got spotted. 34,000 damage. And a reasonable amount of damage done on the mostly broadside HMS Lion over there as well. The turret arrangement's a bit weird though. 2 turrets at the front and 1 turret midships, and that midships turret is in a really awkward position. You have to give an uncomfortable amount of broadside in order to be able to bring that 3rd midships turret to bear. Which will probably end up getting you into trouble if you try to use all 9 of the guns at the same time on a target that's actively shooting back at you, because this ship's armour is terrible. I mean, it is really, really bad. It only has 25mm of bow and stern plating. Right, that's Tier 7 battleship levels of armour. There are Tier 8 cruisers that have better armour plating than that. Which means that this ship's bow and stern can be overmatched by 15-inch guns or higher. The only thing you can angle the stern and bows of this ship against are 14-inch guns and lower, which means that as far as other battleships and battlecruisers are concerned, the only things you can really bow tank against in this thing are ships like HMS Duke of York, HMS King George V, and the very unfortunate HMS Marlborough. Pretty much everything else is going to be able to overmatch your bow and stern armour as if it wasn't even there, and slice right through and potentially citadel you from the front. And the citadel armour on this thing is pretty weak as well. That lack of armour also means that these ships are particularly vulnerable to high explosive. Although, unlike other battleships, fires on board the St. Vincent don't burn for the full 60 seconds. Instead, they have a maximum duration of 40 seconds, which is at least something. Speaking of the high explosive shells, however, the high explosive shells on this thing are absolutely absurd. You know how when the Conqueror was introduced and people very quickly realised that the high explosive shells on that thing were so good that you basically didn't need to fire armour piercing at all. Even if you had a broadside target to shoot at where the armour piercing would definitely have been better, you could still get very, very good results with the high explosive. Well, the 18-inch guns on the St. Vincent are kind of like that, except they're better. And by that I mean, you know the ridiculous, just absolutely absurd fire chance that you have on the Conqueror, with each shell having a 48% chance of setting a fire on target? Well, the high explosive shells on the St. Vincent, actually surprisingly, they only do the same. I know I'm using the word only, and I can't believe I'm using that word to describe a high explosive shell that does 7,100 damage. Which is the same as the Conqueror, despite the fact that the Conqueror fires 16-inch high explosive shells and the St. Vincent fires 18-inch high explosive shells. But where the Conqueror gets a 48% chance of setting a fire on target, which is already ludicrous, the St. Vincent gets 63%. So despite the fact that he was arguably using the wrong ammunition on the Grosser Kurfürst over there, and you could argue the case that the high explosive was the right choice because he really only had the one chance of shooting at the Grosser Kurfürst broadside, and with that thing's armour he was never going to citadel it with armour piercing. But the high explosive gets the job done because it is really, really good. The Lion over there has turned tail and is running, and he has switched to the armour piercing for that because you can citadel a Lion, but he kind of missed his chance there while the Lion was given broadside. He just couldn't reload fast enough, and now, and he has switched back to the high explosive now that the Lion is angling, and he's gotten the armour piercing away. Oh, by the way, he also has torpedoes. I don't know if you've noticed. Yes, this ship has two underwater bow torpedo launchers, one on each side. They have exceptionally good firing angles as well. They can basically be launched at targets straight ahead of you. Although it does only have one torpedo available on each side. But they will do not far short of 30,000 damage each. I mean, obviously you have to take into account the target's torpedo damage reduction. But even taking that into consideration, these torpedoes are going to do 20,000 damage a pop. The Lion's starting to turn in again. He's got a better chance of actually doing some damage here, but, well, now the island's in the way. Oh well, never mind. Is there anything else we haven't covered on this ship? Oh yes, concealment. Yeah, the concealment isn't great. I mean, this ship is massive. It has a base surface detectability range of 15.8 kilometers. Proudmore's managed to get that down to 12.8, which isn't terrible, but it's also not good. It has a top speed of 32 or 33.5 knots. I mean, it's fast. We're not talking USS Georgia levels of fast, but it's pretty fast. However, it also has an engine boost. And with the engine boost and a speed flag running, you can get up to nearly 37 knots in this thing, which is pretty impressive. You'll be glad to know, if you're shooting at one of these things, that it doesn't get the super heal that basically allows it to print a new ship after it's taken damage that HMS Conqueror, HMS Lion, and HMS Nelson get. As best I can tell, it just gets the regular battleship heal. Oof, that was a good amount of damage on an angled Hindenburg. I mean, yes, it's a cruiser, but it's a Hindenburg. It's probably the best armoured cruiser in the game that isn't a battlecruiser. Oh dear. Yeah. That armour only really works if you're given broadside and it's another cruiser shooting at you, not a battleship on with 18-inch guns. You do see Hindenburg captains sometimes doing exactly that, thinking that their armour is better than it is because they've got a turtleback. And it is good armour, but it's cruiser turtleback, it's not battleship turtleback. Shots out at, oh, the Marlborough. Oh yeah, speaking of unfortunate battleships at this kind of level that are armed with the only kind of guns that the St. Vincent can safely bow tank, that, oh, even more unfortunate. There goes the Marlborough. Nice. Tier 9 battleships on with 14-inch guns. Who thought that was a good idea? It's a good job you can get the Marlborough for free, because I can't imagine anybody paying money for it. I mean, the 14-inch guns on the Duke of York and the King George V are hard enough to work with, and they're only tier 7, but tier 9? No thank you. Oh, torpedoes. Oh, this could be really bad. You see, this is the thing about long, narrow ships. If you want something to go really fast in a straight line, in the water you make it long and narrow. But that means it has a terrible turning circle. Fortunately, Proudmoore was able to... Well, he didn't spot the torpedoes, a teammate did, but he was given enough early warning of the torpedoes that he was able to only take the one. He was doubly lucky because he had to turn to give broadside to, well, the Iowa over there in order to avoid the torpedoes that the Iowa and the rest of the Iowa's teammates are paying no attention whatsoever to the fact that he's in a very, very badly armoured battlecruiser that's a huge target and he's given flat broadside. And triply lucky that they weren't paying any attention because he also steered into the island in order to avoid those torpedoes and became an extremely large and badly armoured target giving flat broadside that was basically stationary. But nobody on the enemy team was paying any attention. Oh, there's a couple of those new Tier 11 Pan-European super destroyers having a go at each other there. Those things are just ridiculous. They can each launch 10 torpedoes that have a speed of 86 knots. Right? They're basically underwater rockets. Look at the rate of fire of their 6 120mm guns. Basically, the only downside to those things is that they do not have smoke. But other than that, they are completely overpowered. I'm just glad they're fighting each other. And Proudmoore's able to sneak his 4th kill in. Even though he had the armour piercing loaded, the enemy Delano was on low enough health that was enough to get the kill, but not quick enough to save the friendly Delano. His team are not doing too well, are they? I mean, I'm not saying he's killed everything, but he's got 4 kills and his team have only managed 6 kills between them. If anybody else would like to sink something, I'm sure Proudmoore wouldn't be upset. Speaking of Tier 11 superships, do you remember when the idea of these superships was first floated several months ago? And the first few superships appeared on the test server. People were quite concerned about how you were going to get your hands on them, because it didn't take long for World of Warships to set the worrying precedent of being the first of the wargaming titles to start offering Tier 10 vehicles, ships in this case, obviously tanks in World of Tanks, but Tier 10 vehicles for sale to any Tom, Dick or Harry in the premium shop. And people were quite concerned that this was setting an alarming precedent for the effectively Tier 11 superships. But Wargaming were very quick to reassure everybody that no, the only way of getting one of these superships was to already have Tier 10 ships unlocked. So everybody heaved a huge sigh of relief. And then 3 months later, superships were on sale in the Lighthouse auction for whoever was prepared to stump up the most money. Well, Proudmoore is in a very tricky situation here. The team are well behind on points. He's only got 2 surviving teammates against 6 enemies. He's getting cross-map spammed by a Harugamo. And the Iowa, with its 16-inch armour-piercing shells, can citadel him from the front. The thing is, the St. Vincent is so new that it's likely the Iowa doesn't actually realise he can. And it's also very likely that he does not realise the St. Vincent has torpedoes. Although he knows now, because he's just dodged 1. But he ain't going to dodge 2. And there's the Kraken unleashed. And that's probably Proudmoore's first torpedo kill in this ship. He probably needs to cool down for a bit here, of course. Get himself undetected. Stop getting shot up by the Harugamo. And wait for that heel to come off cooldown. Oh, and it looks like while he was busy with the Iowa, I think it was the Zhao, polished off the other HMS Lion on the enemy team. So 3 against 4. Suddenly the odds aren't quite so bad. Although I'd be wary of giving too much credit to the Montana and the Zhao, although we're straying into spoiler territory here. Don't worry, you won't have long to wait. So, yeah, Proudmoore is slowing down here. He's in no rush to deal with the Montana on the other side of that island. 12 16-inch guns, all of which can overmatch his bow and stern plating. So he's given time for the damage control and the heal to come off cooldown, which is the smart thing to do here. Is he going to actually use the heal? Well, he could. That's the thing, it's a risky game, because he could afford to take a little bit more damage and get the maximum bang for the buck out of the heal, but if he takes more than a little bit more damage, he's going to be dead. Oh, here it comes. Yeah, you want to use the heal, there it is. He actually took most of that on his armor belt. He didn't come around the corner nose in. If he had, the Montana would probably have sunk him. And credit to the Montana, he did actually time that pretty well, because his two forward turrets were right at the extreme limit of their firing angles. So the second Proudmoore appeared, he got the shots off and then angled away. Oh, the Montana's going for the superstructure shots. He doesn't know he can Citadel Proudmoore from the front. Proudmoore, however, does know he can Citadel from the front, and so he's got one torpedo away, and he's focusing his 18-inch guns on the Montana's turrets, and he's disabled one of those rear turrets. And all of his subsequent follow-up shots are trying to knock the second one out. And he's got it, but the Montana had just blown its damage control in order to repair one of the turrets. There's the torpedo hit. That was a good solid 20,000 damage. But, oof. He gets set on fire now by the Montana secondaries. He's dead. And he has been set on fire by the Montana secondaries. So he is dead. And he doesn't quite manage to finish the Montana off, which is unfortunate, but the Zhao does. So it's 5 kills, a Kraken unleashed, and more than 250,000 damage done for Proudmoore in HMS St. Vincent. And now his two surviving teammates, the Zhao and the Montana, just have to deal with the Drake, the last surviving ship on the enemy team, the British Tier 10 heavy cruiser. And it is here where Proudmoore's teammates start trying as hard as they possibly can to throw this match. Did you notice that the Zhao avoided sailing through the southern cap circle at Charlie, and it was the Montana who flipped it? Possibly the Montana flipped it by accident, he just wasn't as fast as the Zhao. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say he intended to flip the cap. Which is good, because the team are ahead on points, and with 3 caps under their control, the enemy Drake cannot win on points now. He needs to sink something. On the bright side, they know where the Drake is, and the Montana has all 12 of his 16-inch guns loaded with armor piercing and is ready to go. So the second he clears that island, he can shoot at the... Really? I guess the Montana just doesn't want to win the game. He could have obliterated the Drake. The Zhao shoots the island instead of the Drake. And the Montana, steaming southwest at full speed, by the time his guns have reloaded, with the Drake's flat broadside to shoot at, he's going to be lucky to be able to get the shots over the island that's going to be in the way. The Drake has grounded, giving flat broadside to the Zhao. And the Zhao is a heavy cruiser. It has 203mm guns. And the Zhao did just fire high explosive rather than armor piercing at the... and he's firing high explosive again. While the Drake is reversing off the island and given an even flatter broadside. Zhao... and the Montana just managed to miss. And the Zhao is still firing high explosive. A single armor-piercing... I mean, the Zhao's armor-piercing isn't particularly good, but it's good enough to sink a Drake under these circumstances. He's going to and he's still firing high explosive. And now he's allowing the Drake to angle away and return fire. And the Drake has better high explosive than the Zhao. How is the Zhao losing this fight? Why did the Montana expend its first armor-piercing salvo against a teammate rather than a flat broadside heavy cruiser? Why is the Zhao now giving broadside to the Drake, who has loaded the armor-piercing because he's not a blithering idiot? Yeah. Oh, man, that was painful to watch. Proudmoore's team trying desperately to throw that battle in the last minute, and failing to even do that. Remember, kids, if you can't take a joke, you shouldn't be playing World of Warships. Proudmoore there, getting a very creditable result in the all-new, all-singing, all-dancing Star of Stage screen and dockyard canteen, the Tier 10 Royal Navy battlecruiser, HMS St. Vincent. Although I suspect that once people realise, particularly once battleships realise, that as long as you're not in the Marlborough, the Duke of York or the King George V, this thing can be citadelled from the front, getting results like that will suddenly start becoming a lot more difficult in this ship. Nevertheless, very entertaining to watch, particularly the last minutes. And I hope you all enjoyed it, because that's it for today. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.